Hello, my friend. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Mr. Fisher, and we're answering one of your requested questions. You wanted us to talk a little bit more about kind of next level 2.0 pro tips for email marketing. So we do. We walk you through just a snippet of some of our email marketing playbooks from inside Unicorn Society and give you some really great best practices for taking your email marketing to the next level. So if you want to improve your email marketing and its performance, this is a great episode for you. Keep on listening. What's up, fitness business nerds? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Today, I'm here with Mr. Fisher. Hello, sir.
Hello. You did it. That for
We
people
did it.
that weren't here with us because you weren't. We tried several times to get this intro out. We have.
This is the first time in a couple hundred episodes where I had to restart my intro because I was distracted by what was going on outside my window. But we made it through, and I'm excited to chat with you today, Fisher, because we're going to be talking about pro tips for email marketing, which was a requested topic by some of our dear listeners. But before we dive in, I just want to make a quick little shout out to all of you who have heard. If you're listening to the podcast, you know that we are right now in enrollment process for our Unicorn Society business coaching group. And if you're a gym owner who listens to the podcast for any length of time and you've thought about working with us, now is the time. If you're listening to this podcast when it comes out, you have until November 19th to apply for our Unicorn Society group. And applying just means you're going to give us some information. We're going to hop on a call and see if we're the right fit. It's going to be a very casual first date to see if we think we can help you and to see if you think that we can help you. and so go click the link in the show notes and do it before November 19th while we still have spots available. Anything you want to add to that, Fisher?
No. Join us.
Great. Awesome. So we had a listener who reached out. I think this question came from Instagram, and they said they loved our past episode where we talked about email marketing, and they wanted more. They wanted more. In our last episode, for those of you who didn't listen to it, go back and find it. We'll maybe include a link down in the show notes to which episode that was. But we really talked about the basics of email marketing last time, the fact that you have to have a list on some platform where you can segment that list, and ideally talk to each segment separately as much as possible. And we went into some other details, but we talked about the basics. And today they wanted us to really circle back and share kind of any next level tips we have. And coincidentally, Fisher, you've been reading a lot on email marketing recently, so this perfect timing. Where do you want to start?
Oh boy, I haven't deep dived. I mean, I guess the first place I'll start with is the good news. Bad news is I might, if you missed the other one, I'm probably going to repeat because I don't even remember what I said in the last one. So, but as it happens, I'm happy to offer a bunch of rapid fire email marketing thoughts. I do want to zoom out for a second, however, before we dig on into this, because I know I'm just being absolute broken record about this these days. But the goal, of course, is not to do email marketing. The goal is to do the right next thing for you. So when we work with people in the Unicorn Society, we take them through something called the Gym Business Freedom Formula. And part of that is assessing where you need help because some things should be done before other things. We're asking a question of Gary Keller's The One, I think The One Thing it's called, that book that he wrote, which is like so simple but so good, which is basically like, what is the one thing that by doing it will make everything else easier or unnecessary? So I want to acknowledge email marketing, I do think is pretty important. The way we organize it is a level 2 strategy, which is to say there's some things that need to be done before you're really digging into email marketing. There's some tools we really want in place, but it's also something you're going to do before you get into some more advanced and complicated strategies. So do make sure that this is the right thing for you. And then, yes, at some point, you're going to want to be doing email marketing as a gym owner. So I'll pull up there. And then I'll also mention that, if you're in the Unicorn Society, we have like a couple of different modules on this that will really tell you step by step, do this in this order. It will take you this long, put in your calendar, get it done. And since we're not going through the whole playbook today, I'm going to give you some very tactical things you can apply immediately to get some better results with your email marketing.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to add?
Do you want to be like, I was just going to say, if we wanted to give them a little bit of context for some of the kinds of things you should be doing before you really worry a ton about email marketing, I think it's some basics. Like you should have a good website. It makes it very clear who you serve, how you serve them, how to get started. You should have a presence on, some social media platforms. You should have some landing pages that help you kind of sell your low barrier offer. Should have a low barrier offer, right? There's some basics. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the basics. A clear avatar, a website that speaks to them, a low barrier offer in place, some process to follow up with those leads, a sales
Yeah.
playbook. Those are the kind of the level one marketing stuff that you really want to get
Hmm.
all those ducks in a row before you focus on email. But then when you do, um, you want to maybe talk a little bit about the basics before you get into the advanced stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I think the basic thing is you mentioned it before is you're going to want to have an organized database. So assuming you've organized your contacts. If not,
Hmm.
the way that I always think about this is anybody that has ever contacted you about fitness and or anybody that could either be a client or a referral source for you, or you just really, really like and want them to keep up with your business, they should be on this list, right? A lot of people are just not generous enough. They don't cast a wide enough net. The way I think about it is anybody who would say hello to in the grocery store should be on your list. If the person actually has a relationship with you, I do think there's something said for warming up the list, which I won't go into great detail, but again, we've got very specific, like done for you word for word templates to copy paste to let people know what's coming and here's what to expect and yada, yada, yada. So assuming that's all in place, then we need to start talking about, okay, what is a pulse that works? In general, I think realistic for most people is at least once per week. You have to email something. You can get away with doing probably up to two or even three as a gym. There are some gyms that do every single day. That's a little bit hardcore internet marketing. I actually don't know that I always love that for a brick and mortar business because at a certain point you do have to balance quantity with quality. And if you're doing that amount of input, unless you have a real passion for this and a lot to say, I think at a certain point you're probably not really adding value. And when we're sending out these communications, of course, listen, on the one hand, part of it is just having an excuse to show up in their inbox so they remember you exist. And so you can give them some soft sells, some clear call to action of like, and, using the PS, if you're interested in learning more, this is the next step to take, do this thing, right? A very clear call to action. So to some extent, I think, either side of this can get a little bit squirrely. I would note that in my experience, the bigger issue I see for a lot of training gym owners is probably too much perfectionism, right? Like I'm not shipping anything because like, what if it's not good? What if they're not going to like me? They're going to be mad at me if I email them, right? So that's not great, And on the other hand, I haven't seen as often, but if you're just like spraying your audience with just really crappy content, then you're going to get a lot of unsubscribes. Your open rates are going to crater and it'll be a bad news. So before I get into hyper tactical stuff, I'll pull up there, but I think those are probably some of the
Yeah.
basics for you to understand.
Yeah, I think you're right, Fisher. I think the place where I see a lot of people make that mistake is that they don't do enough value building. They send emails, but it's to their whole list, so it's everyone on this list. It's
Hmm.
current members, it's past members, it's people that never bought anything. It's and they're only selling. they
Yeah.
they only either sell, just are putting out just things they want people to buy, and they're not building value, they're not informing, they're not adding any content. It's just buy things. Or I see them do the
Yeah.
exact opposite on the other end of the spectrum, which is they're never selling. They're
Yeah.
only
Yeah. Yeah.
putting out like, oh, we have a happy hour this Friday and this is our new programming for the week, and it's just only talking to existing members. And I think
Yeah.
both ends of that spectrum kind of suck.
Hmm.
Always selling and never selling is not it. Fisher's point here
Yeah.
is so important. It's like it's the right pulse of the combination of those two that gets people engaged enough that they want to open your email, so that when you do wind up selling, they already know and like and trust you, and they're ready to take that move. Yeah. So once they got that foundation, Fisher, and they found the right pulse, the right combination of giving and taking, what
Hmm.
what what are some of the more advanced things that they should think about?
Yeah. So I think one thing that's important to really understand is the subject line. And I want to give a lot of attribution right now. I'm finally reading Dean Jackson's book, who's a very famous, uh, I wouldn't say old school, maybe not the right term, but a legend. We can say Dean Jackson is definitely a legend. And I got to say, I'm finally getting around to reading his book. And I was like, well, this is a damn good book. And one of the things he says about the subject line is the subject line is a magic spell. And the only point of the subject line is to open the email. So if you had a magic wand, the spell you're casting is open me, open me. So when you're crafting a subject line, you need to think through, how do I get this open? Now again, we are not hardcore internet marketers, right? This isn't a thing where like every day I get up and I think of 20 different possible subject lines for my email. Like you're not doing that many email marketing. You don't have that scale of a business, but you want to put some thought into what creates curiosity. I think the thing that is useful for you to do is pay attention to yourself. What are the emails that create curiosity for you? It's also probably worth saying that the subject line should be congruent with the actual body. It's not a nice trick to find some way to I lit my mom on fire. And they open up like, just kidding. Like you can go, I think, too far with this and actually,
Yes.
hurt your relationship by clearly being manipulative with the subject line. But some things to play with are, so we're getting hyper tactile today. So for instance, you want to also think about email as like a letter and not so much a e-blast from a business. So when you're doing a subject line, things that you can play with are, rather than having it capital tense or title case, I think that is, where everything's capital letters,
Yep.
make it like a sentence, right? So it's usually just capitalize the first letter of the sentence. It's a very small and subtle thing, but says like, I'm a person writing you a letter, not a business doing a business communication. Related to that, you can also play with things like not capitalizing the first letter can be good for open rates. Putting things inside brackets can also make it jump out when people are scrolling through things. People do like numbers, right? We're not quite in the land of BuzzFeed, but people like lists. So like 3 things, 5 things, because again, you're creating an open loop that's creating some curiosity. And then depending on how sophisticated your email service providers, some can do this and some can't. But if you can periodically and then use this superpower gracefully and conservatively, but you can put a contact name in the subject line, either just the subject
Hmm.
line, which by the way, you're going to get a big old open rate if you do that. So only use that when you're really ready to use that particular play. You can put it in as part of a subject line and integrate it. Sometimes I've done things where I'll put uh, ellipses. I don't know the names of things today. The dot, dot, dot. What's the 3 periods?
It's
Ellipses?
ellipses. Yeah.
I don't know the names of anything.
That's
So
correct.
that's something you can play with sometimes. And admittedly, what's interesting is I use a number of different software platforms for the 3 different businesses that I oversee marketing for. And I got to say, Keep, or formerly Infusionsoft, which I basically never recommend because it's like way too complicated. I got to say, the amazing thing about it is Keep not only gives you a lot of awesome functionality that some of the more user friendly ones don't, but they have a really great spam filter. Well, if you do something, you're like, oh, this is a great idea. They'll be like, that's, you look spammy. Don't do that. They'll literally like stop the email from going out, which is very valuable. The other software platforms won't do that, so you won't really know, because there are some things that seem like a good idea but can maybe hurt deliverability, right? So, and here's another. This is one. Ready? We're getting so granular today. Something that can work for or potentially against you depending on deliverability, and we're testing this right now to see if this is going to be an issue. Is adding some more white space between the bottom of the email and the unsubscribe button. Right, just making it a little bit hard for people to get the unsubscribe. It also makes the email read a little bit more like a personal email, which is very important if you are going for a more personal vibe, because of course a normal email you send to a friend doesn't have an unsubscribe button. I think another thing to consider is fonts. And there's kind of 2 ways to go with this. So Business for Unicorns, if you're listening to this, I hope you're on our email list. If not, what's wrong with you? Go to our homepage right now. You're missing awesome stuff. I love our font there. I think it's very, very readable, but it's clearly like email marketing, right? MFF, we use more Arial because I often want the email to feel closer to like a Gmail. And a lot of fonts and email service providers make it very obvious that this is marketing, right? So back to the subject line, I think a couple other things I'll put on your radar is another pro move is resending an email to the people that did not open it. So if there's an email communication, and this can sometimes, by the way, can be an operational move. If you're doing a pricing increase and you really want to make sure people get it, you can send the same email later. And this again gets into borderline land. So depending on your email service provider, this I think might be bad advice, but we'll often send an email with RE colon name of the subject line or forward colon name of the subject line. Sometimes I'll even just put, ICMYI in case you missed it, colon subject line. And then I will write a little blurb at the top, a very short blurb that makes it look almost as if I'm forwarding this person this email personally and following up to see if they got it right. And again, there's a little bit of gray area in here. I'll tell you, sometimes the thing that I see that just I find just grotesque because it's so fakey. I don't mind the strategy I just laid out because it's email marketing. Clearly, it's email marketing, right? I'm not trying to pretend like it's a personalized thing. Will it read that way to some people? Sure. Might some people get confused? Yeah, maybe. But I'm not lying. I think that's always my line with marketing is like, don't lie. So sometimes I've been sent ones from like the hardcore internet like marketing companies where they'll actually put in a forwarded message to make it look like the owner of the company personally wrote, "Hey, check out Mark's business. Look, he's up to great work. I'd love for you to set up a call to find out more. I'm really impressed with what he's doing." And then
Hmm.
you can see that and it's forwarded, but the whole thing is copy pasted. It's just like they just, check out, so and so's name of their website. And the whole thing to me, just that feels just like gross, gross, gross. So like I guess it works, but I just don't think the ends justify the means as a person. I think, you might have a different perspective, but I have a real like kind of important value that how you do anything is how you do everything. So for me, that's a line that feels sketchy. But at any rate, I'll pull up there. But those are just, I think, some thoughts for how to really leverage a subject line to make sure the email gets open. In summation, the key thing is remember, it's a magic spell. And the only thing the subject line is supposed to do is create curiosity, just get the email opened.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great overview, Fisher. I think it's both some big picture takeaways in terms of like the function of the subject line, and also a lot of like really great granular tips that I hope our listeners were taking notes on. Because I think that if they don't open it, nothing else matters. Right? If they
Yeah.
don't open it, it doesn't matter how good your content is, how good your offer is. They have to open it, which means you have to break through the noise of people's inboxes, which are for the most part
Hard.
atrocious. Yeah. Yeah, inboxes are hard, and people have many of them. And if you're sending to their work email address, you're going to get deprioritized. It's complicated, but I think subject lines are important for that reason, because if you don't inspire them to open it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit
Yeah.
about the content part, because I feel like the place where I see
Hmm.
people struggle the most is generating ideas for what to say, like what the content
Yeah.
is. We see it with
Yeah.
Unicorn Society members all the time. They have really great platforms, really great segmented lists. They might be thinking about subjects and trying to get people to open them, but then they
Mhm.
struggle with consistently, week after week, month after month, year after year,
Yeah.
uh, figuring out what to talk about, and then building a system for themselves
Hmm.
where they actually create the content to do it. And I know, this has been a big part of your life for
Right.
literally years now. And so can you just talk about like that,
Yes.
the rhythm that you found that works for you?
Hmm. Yeah. So I have lists at all times. I keep and curate a Google Doc for very specific for Mark Fisher Fitness emails, for Business for Unicorns emails, and for my YouTube channel of content. And to be honest, I probably shouldn't and don't need a separate one for Business for Unicorns and YouTube. I would note very briefly, if any of you are creating content for multiple platforms, one thing that I do not think is correct is to feel like it all needs to be different. It doesn't. It shouldn't be different, because in practice, no one's paying attention to most of your stuff. So, and furthermore, some people will only consume in one channel. So not only don't feel like you need to make different don't feel like you need different topics. You actually can do the same topics, just do them on the different platforms. That's sufficiently different. So I have these content lists I'm always curating, and I think you should have one of those too. And the way that I do it is, and we, in fact, Unicorn Society members, I literally like show them, here's like literally my Google Doc. Here's what this looks like, because I just have a Google Doc, because I importantly in my business, and I would suggest actually you consider this too, if you have any legs in your business, I don't build it in the email service providers. I have someone on my team that does that. Most of you could likely outsource that with a VA. We actually use somebody that is, I guess, kind of like a VA, but someone we pay like pretty good rate, because he's unbelievable. And his name is Craig. And he's one of my best friends since college. And he still works for us. And he's just an absolute eagle eye for proofreading and copy editing. And no, you can't have him. He's ours. He's amazing. So Craig takes these Google Docs where I just write it in there and he puts it in. So I know that's a little bit tangential to the first question, which I'm going to circle back to in a minute. But I think there's something to be said for having somebody else copy edit if at all possible. And at the very least, upload it in the email service provider to pull list if and when is needed. So you can just focus on, you make the magic, you do the thing. Now, as far as back to this curation idea, right? So the top of each of these docs, which I'm always working at adding more content to stay ahead of the content snowball. It's always coming to chase me down the hill. I have this never ending list. And as I write pieces on things, then content goes off of that list. And then I'm adding things on there. And I get a lot of my ideas, one, from doing continuing education for all the businesses. I'm always like thinking of new things that like, oh yeah, that's an interesting thing to share, or a way to think about that, or it sparks an idea for a piece of content. And then of course, working with your clients. And I think the best place to start to think about the content you'll create is think about the most common problems your avatar faces and the most common question your avatar is asking, right? So start with a problem, start with a question, and then use that and then build a solution around that. Now, some other ways to get to fill up your tank if you don't have that. First of all, you show me somebody that doesn't have things to say about their content. I'll usually show you somebody who's not actively engaged in their learning. And I don't mean that to be judgmental. I realize sometimes in life you have a season where that's hard to do, but in practice, I do think that's going to help. If you find your well is dry, you can also ask your clients either in a private Facebook group, or you can even ask. I do this periodically with the email list, which you might see. I'll periodically be like, what do you want me to cover? Right. I'll actually just ask the email list, or I'll post a thread in a private Facebook group and ask for content ideas. And that's another way that I get ideas for content. The final way I'll tell you is actually leveraging ChatGPT. Now, to be honest, I haven't had to do this too much myself, but ChatGPT is both simultaneously, my take is the absolute most unbelievably overrated and the absolutely unbelievably underrated piece of software in the history of the world. I think both are true. ChatGPT is not going to be able to write the content for you on a first draft, but it can do things like brainstorm, like brainstorming, tell them about your avatar, tell them about your business, and ask them to come up with 25 or 50 topics for articles to write, or the names of articles. And that can be a great way. So ChatGPT is great at brainstorming. I'll also say briefly, while we're ChatGPTing, it can also write a pretty good first draft sometimes. The metaphor that I've heard that I think feels very true is it's like a pretty good intern. So I treat ChatGPT like a pretty good intern. Often when I'm writing, I'll give ChatGPT a task and I'll have it write a piece of content while I write content. And then I go back and I see what it did. And I'd say about a third of the time, it's completely absolute garbage, worthless. Third of the time, it's usable, but whoa boy, requires a lot of work. Maybe less than me writing from scratch, but like it takes some time. And then about a third of the time, it's not too far off. It doesn't require that much for me to both look for factual errors as well as like zhuzh it up and make it in my voice. So I think ChatGPT can help with this, but I guess I'll pull up there. But those are some of I think the ways you should think about topics and ways and I think hopefully some practical strategy to make sure that you always have this never ending list of things. So you always have things to write about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's super useful for our listeners, Fisher, because I think for a lot of them, they're just not doing that first step. They don't have a document or a repository where they put ideas as they come up. So they try and keep them in their head if they're even trying to think
Right.
about it at all. But having a place, a simple Google document to just jot down, oh, here's an idea. Here's a question a client asked me. Here's a question a team member asked me. Here's something I read about or I saw on social media. And listen, anything can be inspiration. If you found it informative or inspirational or motivational or interesting,
Yeah.
it's a piece of content. And so just jotting it
Yeah.
down somewhere so you have this ongoing list, I think is the takeaway that will be a game changer for most of you. And I agree. I think for a lot of our listeners, especially for those of you who don't think of yourselves as good writers, you don't have maybe a lot of experience or reps with writing, I think a tool like ChatGPT can probably give you a pretty great first draft in terms of fleshing out the idea. And the most important thing that you all will have to do with any robot that's writing for you, like Mark said, is put it in your voice. Like they can brainstorm the ideas and make the lists and give you a structure that's probably going to be pretty decent, especially if you give it a few prompts to help style it in the style of someone that you admire, or the style of a kind of talk or letter that you want to write. But you'll always have to do that extra work. But I think your game-changing tip here is really just having that repository you can turn to, so you don't have to think about what content to do when you're making the content.
Yeah,
it allows you to get
because that's where people are in issues. Yeah. Because
under pressure
another
to get it out tomorrow and then to think about what it is today.
I know you all need to take Time Ninja. Sign up for Unicorn Site, take Time Ninja, people. Admittedly, again, I am like so wired the other way. I'm like really trying to get months ahead, and then sometimes that's annoying too because that's not realistic for businesses like ours. And then things change, and I'm like annoyed because I'm like, I spend 20 minutes moving everything around. But and I think that's maybe like another good consideration is ideally you want to be far ahead too, because ideally there's some intersection with this in a marketing calendar. Now, again, marketing calendar for us, I'm not going to have you do that first thing. Okay. Like if you're tweeting out, I'm going to make you money first thing. That's the first thing I'm going to care about. I was like, what do we do? Let's get some wins. Let's do, we have a number of fast acting plays I'll probably start with first. And then from there, and in fact, sometimes there's even a world where we'll leverage an email marketing thing before the website and the thing is good to go. As long as we know what we're selling, the reality is sometimes depending on where you're at, and to be honest, it doesn't happen as often for unicorn sided people because by definition, because of our criteria, usually there's a little bit more sophistication going on. So, usually someone is not bleeding out. But in the event that I'm trying to help somebody that is in a tough situation, sometimes I will say this, there's a world where if you hadn't been emailing your list, it's not the best thing, it's not the nicest thing, but there are ways of really leveraging powerful offers and even leveraging the structure and the style of that email to really get some movement and get some leads moving quickly. Because another thing that is worth knowing is there are almost two types of email broadcasts, right? You have like broadcast email, which are very clearly one to many, and you put the contact name in, but they know you're writing to everyone, right? And this is when you think of the more traditional value building content, these are things, this is content that is ideally entertaining, it's enjoyable, it's educational. A lot of our content is going to be educational. Or it's inspiring, it's energizing, it gives you motivation, it gives you inspiration, it gives you energy. You feel like I can do it, right? And depending on who you are and your brand and really just what your skill sets are depends. I think that's going to have an impact on what type of content you do and how much. But aside from the more broadcast one to many stuff that's just giving value, always, always, always with a PS that clarifies what the next movement is when you're ready to work with us more closely. The other thing, the other approach, which again, giving attribution is a Dean Jackson approach, is what he sometimes calls the 9-word email. He's pretty intense that it has to be 9 words. I'm a little less sold that that's actually that true, but I think there's something to be said for having a short email. The point of the email is to get a response, right? I think that's another thing important to understand. All emails have to have a goal. What do you want to have happen? And it wants to be an action. Sometimes it might just be read the thing, take action and maybe that's your goal, but usually we still want a soft sell PS because on the back end of reading the thing, today might be the day that they had a weird talk with their doctor. So that's part of the game is you're creating what's called top of mind awareness. You want to just keep being in their email inbox so they don't forget about you. And optimally, you want to be an invited and welcomed guest because you're bringing cookies, you're bringing warm cookies, you're bringing value. You can periodically play with this, again, what Dean Jackson calls a 9-word email where there's really nothing in it. And it's just like, usually like name, and the classic way it's formulated is, are you still interested in working on your fitness in 2023 or whatever? Right. I sometimes feel a little bit weird. Are you still interested? I think that can work if it's an outreach to cold leads of expressed interest. Again, for me, that feels like a little smarmy if it's people that have never actually expressed interest. Because again, you're implying that maybe they're not doing it. Whereas if somebody has expressed interest and gone AWOL, I think it's a little more appropriate because you are asking sincerely, hey, you were at one point, that's implied, you had reached out. Are you still interested in discussing whatever, right? And the goal of that email, it's important to note, is to get a response, to start a conversation, right? So something that I've been spending a lot of time lately that we're in the process of rolling out at Mark Fisher Fitness is sell by chat, right? How do you create essentially like I don't want to call it like a sales funnel because sometimes depending on your low barrier offer, you're not even necessarily exchanging money. But the first thing you got to do is make sure that the person's willing to engage, right? Are they friendly and cooperative? Are they interested in what you have to offer? Do they have a need that your product or solution might serve? And then you want to bring them through a series of questions to move them forward. Now, I'll say this. I've been playing this a little bit with email. Email's a little harder because it's just not as fast of a response. I think in general, doing things like DMing new followers and people that like and comment your post, that will tend to have a quicker, shorter back and forth for admittedly the very small percentage. It's not the vast majority of people, but there's going to be a small percentage of people in any given week that maybe are interested and they've followed your page or they've liked the comments. There's some reason to believe they might be interested in what you do. I think the key thing with any approach to either sell by chat via Instagram DMs or even the sell by chat for emails is just remember most people at any given time are not looking for your services right now, right? And that's okay. And they might at some point. I'm not saying you should write them all off and be annoyed with them, but in practice, I think if you craft this email well, what it does is it gives you an opportunity based on how often you're integrating it into your email to begin to start a dialogue, to start a conversation, right? My friend John Franken always says, conversations lead to conversions or conversions happen in conversations. Something like that. I'm sure he stole it from someone else, but I still think that's true. And I think that's another opportunity that I don't see a lot of gyms use that I think would be clever for them to start to leverage is just try to start the conversation, right? In some cases, listen, again, you will find that you get conversations not moving you where you want to go. But, listen, there's somebody said for like, you can't quantify all of this, obviously track things. If you feel like you're spending a lot of time, and it's not going anywhere. maybe don't do it all the time, but conversions happen in conversations. And I think starting the relationship and starting to back and forth, particularly if you're just not getting any leads, you're not getting any traction, seems like a worthwhile use of your time. Seems like a worthwhile use of your time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that the main thing I'm taking away, and I'm hoping our listeners take away from that tip, is that they should be thoughtful about the purpose of each email, right? They should be clear about
Yeah,
what they
that's
hope to
precisely it.
achieve with each email. Like, what's the purpose? Are you trying to just start a conversation with a stranger? You're trying to get them to read something, you're trying to get them to respond, trying to get them to click a button, click a link, book a session, and really getting clear about what that is. And even if it's just, you want some of the people to click through the PS and you're just going to entertain them, and then hopefully some of the people are going to
Yeah.
click through the PS. How are you making that PS a compelling cookie that they want? Yeah. So I think that's great. Let's pull up there in the interest of time, because I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here in terms of the importance of subject lines, how to make sure you consistently have ideas for your email marketing, some kind of tips and tricks for how to make the emails kind of sticky and action oriented by being clear about their purpose. I feel like that's a lot of like really great tips for our listeners. So this is one I hope you were taking notes on, friends, because a lot of tiny little micro tips and a lot of big picture overarching ideas that both can help you just get infinitely better with your marketing. So thanks, Fisher. I think this is a really good one. And clearly this is a thing that's, it's not going away anytime soon. Email marketing is here to stay.
No.
Text is certainly coming up to meet it, and has come up to meet it as being important. This is a skill set as a business owner you're going to want to get good at if you're not yet. And hopefully today helped you move in that direction. As a quick reminder before we wrap up, if you want to apply for Unicorn Society, do it before November 19th. Afterwards, you can always join our wait list, but go click the link in the show notes and let us know if you want to work with us, because we love to talk to you. Thanks for a great conversation, Fisher, and I'll see you on the next one.
Bye.